Good evening. If you feel like taking your jackets off, do so. Could we now pray silence for my priest to say a few words, please? Brother Chris.
Wrong one. Good evening, everyone. I'd like us just to pause for a moment to reflect on how our gratitude is a virtue that brings great enjoyment to life. In order for us to enjoy this short life while here on earth, we need to take time each day to be grateful for our daily life experiences. I'm referring to the simple everyday things that many people can take for granted. The comfort of a bed, the aroma of an early morning coffee, running water from a tap, even the clothes we wear and the fresh air we breathe are regular examples of these blessings in life. And if we're not careful, we can begin to take these things for granted ourselves. But let's remember that not everyone has access to these small pleasures. Yet many people who receive these daily blessings do not take the time to fully experience the small pleasures that fill their lives, and so they are unhappy. We do not want to be like them. We want to have an attitude of gratitude for all the daily blessings that God bestows upon us, and this will make us happier people. So, dear Lord, let us always remember to take time to stop and time to be grateful. And we ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. So thank you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Mr. Mayor, just in case you're
Thank you ever so much. Very kind
trying
of
to
you.
keep it out the way of the papers, but at least
Yeah,
it's
no,
there.
that's kind of you. Good evening and welcome. Can I start off by the standard, any apologies for absence? Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Gaskell and Councillor Miller.
That's right. Miller, yeah. Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Hood.
Pardon? Hood. Councillor
Good evening,
James?
Mayor. Councillor Parker.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. Thank you. The minutes of the 10th of May and the 17th of May, which I've got here. I'm assuming I can sign them. Any problems with them? Have you seen them? Thank you. God, I have to sign every bloody page. I'll do that later. Announcements. Where's my thing? There it is. I have a few announcements to make. First and foremost, can I welcome Mrs. Court? How are you? Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I also welcome Councillor Tucker. She has been here for a while and it's good to see her. Thank you. Now, we actually got a certificate of recognition of the work that we do with BCOT. So I'm now going to present a different one. We got our certificate here? I'm now going to present to the Mayor of Basingstoke, on behalf of the Council of Basingstoke and Dean, the certificate of recognition of the work that we do with BCOT. And it's very welcome. Anybody want to say anything about it? No. Thank you very much. Put that up there. Now, as most of you will know, every year we have an exchange with our German twin town, Eiskirchen. Hundreds of young people go across to Germany or they come to us. And we were there in the latter part of June. So there are 4 days activity, mostly sports. But we had to participate in a few meals with a few drinks, and that was tough too. But the reality is, we had a wonderful weekend. And to top it off, we won the trophy. So that was good. Now, we're going to be handing out certificates in a moment for public service. And I'll talk to about one element of that in a moment. So, do you have any announcements, Mr. Chief Executive? No? In which case, I'll sit down now. The next item is certificates of public service. When we were talking about this agenda item, we've had a few recent deceased people who were members. And I thought that we were not completely recognizing public service because those that pass away whilst in service don't get a recognition service certificate. They don't get it. They just fall by the wayside. And I thought that was wrong. So I've asked the Chief Executive and the officers and with myself to have a look at how we can amend those rules. There's a little way to do that. And I hope you will respond positively to this particular attempt to introduce even more equitable dealings with people. So we'll come back to the next meeting of the council, full council, with a proposal. And we can debate it then. You'll have information about it in advance. It won't be an announcement. It'll be a statement and a proposal. So, putting that to one side until the next meeting, we are presenting a certificate of past service to Laura Edwards, who is here tonight, and it's good that she is. And would you like to come over here? Well done. Thank you.
I'd just like to say thank you to the council, all the councillors and all the residents of Winklebury who showed me a lot of kindness and support over the past 4 years. I've taken a lot from it, so thank you, and I hope to see you all soon.
Thank you, Laura. The next one is bigger. And it's a certificate of long service for Jane Franco, Councillor Jane Franco, who is also, of course, a county councillor. But Jane has done 20-year service for this council. And we have a certificate for you, Jane. Do you want me to come over there?
Yes. That's right.
You sure?
Yeah. You know I'm independent.
It's okay, stay there. Now, Jane,
Thank you very much.
it comes with a bowl, which will be engraved. We'll get it to you next week. Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah, grab the food.
Sorry? She. Sorry? Now, I just said to Jane, it comes with an engraved bowl if you've done 20-year service, and it's on the way. It's being engraved even as we speak. Excuse me. So the next item on the agenda is questions from the members of the public. And there are no received questions. And the next item is petitions, and there are no petitions. The next item is resignations and appointments. Any changes from the group leaders? Councillor Bound?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may, I'd like to replace Councillor Rowland with, Councillor Rowland to replace Councillor Gaskell as a reserve on Audit and Accounts Committee, Councillor Capon to replace Councillor Rattigan on the Human Resources Committee, Councillor Capon to replace Councillor Rattigan on the Investigating and Disciplinary Committee, and Councillor Rattigan to replace Councillor Rowland on the Community, Environment and Partnership Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bound. Is that all being recorded? Yeah, thank you. Councillor Harvey? Nothing? Thank you. Councillor James? No. Councillor, yeah, thank you. That's the first page done already. The next item is revenue and capital outturn. Beg your pardon? Sorry?
Resignations from the committees.
Speaking?
So if you go to this one.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, we have outside appointments. Nominations needed for outside appointments. 2, if they're available, Aldworth Education Trust. If there are no councillor applications, to ask the council to approve the appointment of Mrs. M. Duncan. Are there any councillors who wish to be nominated to the Aldworth Education Trust? No? No. Councillor James? No, thank you. Are members content to appoint Mrs. M. Duncan as suggested by the Education Trust? Yes. Great, thank you. The Basingstoke Musical Festival, there is 1 vacancy. Any interest? Unfortunate, thank you. Relate North Hampshire also has a vacancy. Any nominations? No. And the Vine Community School Management Committee currently has 2 vacancies. Councillor Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I nominate Councillor Laura James and myself to that position?
Thank you. You got no appointments? No. Is that agreed? Thank you. That's still the first page done. The next item is item 9 on the agenda, revenue and capital outturn for 2017/2018. Councillor Tate to propose.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report you have this evening for to note and approve is the annual revenue and capital outturn report. And I'd like again to report that we have, I believe, finished a year with an excellent control of the budget, with revenue expenditure at 99.7% of budget and income at 99.8%. Capital expenditure was 23.1 million at 97% of forecast. So overall, a very excellent performance, leaving with an 181,200 under budget. Due to the excellent control from the officers and their teams, for which I highly commend them, these sort of results have become the norm and I hope will continue in the future. In discussing this report, I'd also like to draw attention of members to the main capital programme achievements for the year. And I think it's worth going through some of these to indicate the width and the extent of our capital expenditure across the community. So in 2017-18, disabled facility grants totaled £1.39 million, which leaves us with 139 bathroom adaptations, 29 stair lifts, 18 major adaptations, 7 ceiling hoists and 16 improvements and 2 kitchen adaptations. So a wide-ranging support to those less able within our community. The existing satisfactory purchases were able to deliver 13 additional units of temporary accommodation from the capital budget. The local infrastructure fund made 15 completions and accepted 22 new projects totaling 1.3 million. These include the Hurst Leisure Centre, Basingstoke Sports, Kempshop Village Hall, Basingstoke Peace Garden, Fieldgate Centre, Cordale and Culver Road play areas. I'm sure those will be highly appreciated by their local communities. Property investment totaled 15.2 million, with 3 new acquisitions, which should increase the income from to revenue by some 820,000 from above the forecast Treasury investments for the future. In green initiatives, we made capital expenditure to totally tennis for new lighting, LED lighting, which will save in the longer term through lower energy costs. In Basingview, we're investing in new offices and a new hotel. And finally, Beggarwood Community Centre was budgeted for £764,000 and has been delivered. So overall, I think both an excellent control of revenue, but also significant input into capital projects to support all levels of the community. And I hope that the Council will note and approve the report.
Anybody want to say anything about this? Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just looking in Appendix 3, there's a lot of favourable variations there, and I just would like to know what's going to happen to this money. Is it going to roll over to next year? Is it going to be absorbed somewhere else? In particular, 4 examples, page 41, homelessness, £34,500. While we've still got people sleeping rough, there's always more we can do to help the homeless. Community safety, £81,700. There's plenty of things that we could spend on community safety, especially CCTV, because we've had community halls, a number of them broken into recently. sport and recreation, £135,000. And it's not just the amounts, it's the percentage as well. I mean, that's a 30% underspend in the last two that I've mentioned. And housing benefits, a 60% underspend. Now, the explanation for that is changes to government rollout of universal credit, etc. But while we've still got a long waiting list in this borough and problems with housing, I would like to think that we could find a good use for that money. Will the portfolio holder please advise?
If I may, Councillor Tate, would you be prepared to take the next 2 or 3 questions and then just answer them all? Would you be prepared to take the next 2 or 3 questions and then answer those 3 at the same time?
Mr Mayor, as, the report is provided for noting. I'm not sure that there is questions can be taken. If there are questions that want to be submitted in writing, then I can quite happily respond to them.
Well, all I was doing was simply saying you presented the report and it's here for noting, but people can make a comment about the issue, and Councillor McCormick just has. Does anybody else want to say anything? Councillor Isaac.
Good evening, Mr Mayor. I'd like to congratulate Councillor Tate and the officers on doing an excellent job. This is a great outturn. This council is maintaining services and is able to find £33 million in this year to provide for services for residents, despite the fact that we only obtain just over £7 million of council tax revenues and now are only receiving £4.8 million in government grants. It's a time when there's been a real terms reduction in government funding for local authorities across the country over the last 8 years of 49%. So I think we're doing very well. The outturn for this year is again within budget, very close to budget, at a time when in 2016/17 there was a £901 million overspend in services budgets by local authorities across the country. We do all this without incurring debt and interest charges, when so many other councils are racking up debt. West Berks, our neighbours, have just announced that they're going to borrow another £50 million to invest, but it's still borrowing. So I'd like to endorse this report and say well done to my cabinet member colleagues and all the officers.
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. Anyone else want to say anything? Okay, if we turn to page 30 of our agenda, we're asked to note the net expenditure on services and having an underspend of 181,000. The revenue expenditure was controlled within budget just. The capital expenditure was 23.1 million and 97% of the latest capital programme budget. And contribution to and from reserves are set out in the appendices. Is that noted? Great. Okay. The Cabinet also requests that we approve the rephasing of capital expenditure budgets due to revised programming into the future years and the revised capital programme for 18-19 to up to and including 21-22 detailed in Appendix 10. That's simply rephasing the capital programme. Is that approved? Okay, thank you very much. We'll then move on to the next item on the agenda, which is 9. Yeah. Yeah. We'll take a time. I think they have us 9. The next item is the Hackney carriage and private hire licensing policy. Councillor Diane Taylor to propose.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Can I present to you our new taxi and private hire policy for the Council's approval? This is a document that has been many months in the formulation and draws together in one policy a range of various licensing resolutions that we've made over the years in our committee, and it also includes up-to-date changes in legislation and official advice. The document sets out the Council's position in respect of the necessary criteria for vehicles and drivers and operators in order to maximise the safety and amenity of the travelling public in this borough. I'd like to thank our licensing officers for their very hard work in formulating the policy, and I commend it to the Council for approval to be formally adopted on the 1st of September of this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diane. Councillor Cutty, okay, that's fine.
Mr Mayor, that was me seconded.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to get up and say that the officers have worked really hard on this over a number of months and years, I think nearly now. And I think it should be recognised the amount of work that's being done on this in Basingstoke, and congratulate them, because it's not easy when you actually look at the paperwork involved in this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. Anyone else? Is that approved? Great. That was easy. Thank you for that. We're now moving on to item 11, I think. The Treasury Management Annual Report 2017 to 18. And it's Councillor Tate again, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Treasury Management in 2017-18 produced a positive variance of £122,000. And again, I'd like to commend the work both of the officers on the management side, but also within the financial management teams for delivering this. Not only are we achieving higher than forecast returns, but we're also maintaining a very high benchmark standard when it's judged by external assessment, both in high return and low risk. Balancing the investment in new property-related instruments and maintaining liquidity has been a challenging part of this year's Treasury management, but the return itself shows how the movement we've made from our traditional investment strategies to the new property-related investment has underpinned the success and will do for the future. The overall return is at 1.62% against 1.383 estimated, and for the future, again, I can see how the property investment vehicles become extremely important for the future development of the revenue for the budgets. So again, a good, strong year in terms of Treasury management.
This is an item to be noted. Any comments? Would you have a seconder, Mr. Tate? Councillor Isaac again. Okay, thank you. Any comments? Councillor? Yeah. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would also like to congratulate our officers on the achievement of the Treasury Management Strategy, and also thank my fellow members on the Audit and Accounts Committee who had the job of monitoring the strategy through the year. And I think we have done a very good job with the portfolio holder on getting to a satisfactory conclusion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Cousins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just very briefly. Just really like to draw the members of public's attention to page 226, and I appreciate that they may not, have the means, motive, or indeed the inclination to look there, so I'll help them out. It's just rather interesting to note that we loaned £7 million to local authorities, and whilst that's all well and good, reasonable and laudable, for a return of £85,000 seems rather frustrating, considering that our affordable house build, once again last year, was atrocious. What I think that we should actually do is invest in housing in this borough. We have a massive housing crisis, so let's get on and build some houses, invest that £7 million in some bricks and mortar. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cousins. Anyone else?
Councillor Cousins has already spoken, hasn't he?
You want to speak again, Councillor Gardner?
He's already spoken. No, you can't. He's already spoken once. You could ask Councillor.
All the experts in the world are now telling me what the answer is.
You could ask Councillor Isaac because he seconded it and he didn't speak.
The answer to your question is you're not allowed to speak, and I've been given the advice. I don't think it matters a lot. I don't think it matters a lot. Say what you want to say.
Sorry. It was in response to the last accusation on investment with local authorities. These investments were made in 1998 and they were made by the joint administration, not by this administration.
Point of clarification, Mr. Mayor. I'm actually referring to Suffolk County Council, who received £5 million as of the 23rd of March 2018, and Conway County Borough Council, who received £2 million on the 31st of January 2018. So made under this administration, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
I got the point that you made. It's in the papers, yes. Anyone else? Councillor Isaac, you seconded the report. You haven't spoken. Would you like to make a comment? No? Thank you. Is this noted? Agreed. Thank you.
Can we have the air conditioning turned down and say, oh, it's like an icebox in there? Thank you.
I'm sure we get an officer to. Thank you. Shall I say that again? To be sure, to be sure. The adoption of the Old Basing and Litch Pit Neighbourhood Plan, Development Plan. Councillor Ruffle to propose.
I propose the adoption that we make the Old Basing Neighbourhood Plan. There should be a recommendation somewhere in our papers. It may even be on the agenda. Yes, it is. Item 12, that we make it, and of course that we congratulate those involved. It's quite fascinating, just to digress, if I may, Mr. Mayor, page 245 of this bulky tome that most of which has got something to do with me, just to look at the history of Old Basing. The Romans went steaming through there with a Roman road. The Basingers were there for a while. It's where we get the name for Basingstoke from. They were an Anglo-Saxon tribe, and their descendants, of course, can still be heard using Anglo-Saxon when talking about a motorway service station near Junction 6 at the current moment. Not just the Romans, not just the Anglo-Saxons. King Alfred had a battle against the Vikings there. William the Conqueror was supposed to have had a castle there. And then, of course, we go to Basing House, which is one of the historic jewels in our history of our borough, which, of course, eventually was destroyed at the end of the Civil War. And then later on from that, the Basingstoke Canal, of which I'm very fond, went cut through, followed by the railway, and then obviously more recently the motorway. And of course it is the parish with, I think, the only Grade 1 listed park in the borough, a Grade 1 listed park that got chopped in half by the motorway. But as such, it is a real treasure, and the residents who put together this wonderful neighbourhood plan have done their best to recount that history, and it's no surprise that's why they care passionately for Old Basing and Lichbit, and have come up with a group of policies that they hope will be of great support to them when considering planning decisions in the future. So, Mr Mayor, I ask that Council make this, and secondly, congratulate them all for their great efforts. It should never be underestimated. Many parishes often approach this task with trepidation and then don't start. And we're doing quite well at the moment. We've got about 8 through and about another 5 or 6 on the way. And I would encourage people to have a read of this to see how it can be done, as well as have a read of some of the other neighbourhood plans that have come through. So well done to them.
Thank you, Councillor. I understand Councillor Goddison might be seconding it.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, indeed, we've had Romans and Bazingas and Vikings and all sorts of people. And Basing is now full of conservatives, just to keep the tradition going. Some years ago, you'll all be aware that we were producing village design statements, and a lot of effort went in our parish to producing a bit.
Could you speak up a bit, please?
A lot of effort went into our parish to producing a village design statement, and there was considerable disappointment when 3 months before it was due to be adopted by the council, the then government decided that such documents were no longer to have any supplementary planning significance. So when the village parish council decided that we must have a neighbourhood plan, there was a little bit of a difficulty in galvanising the locals into putting the effort in required. Councillor David White took on the role as project leader, gathered a very significant group of people around him who have worked extremely hard. When the parish was informed that the plan was done and there was going to be a referendum, there was a surge of excitement, and Brexiteers and Remainers suddenly woke up and thought, my goodness, another referendum. They were quite disappointed when they found that the referendum was about the neighbourhood plan. But however, the turnout was of 20, in view of the amount of elections which we've all gone through recently, a turnout of 21% would, I suggest, should be considered as quite a reasonable one in the circumstances. And 86% of those people who voted were very much in favour. So as Councillor Raffel has said, it is a very comprehensive plan, it's a very good plan, and I hope the borough will feel able to adopt it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goddison. Would you put your light off, please? Are we approving this? The idea here is that we adopt the plan, or make the plan. Yeah, is that agreed? Thank you. We're moving on. The next item is item 13, the adoption of the Design and Sustainability, Housing and Parking Supplementary Planning Documents, starting at page 289 and finishing at page 300. It's a recommendation from the Cabinet. 289?
Councillor Raffel to propose.
Yeah, okay. And I believe you're recommending it, Councillor Raffel?
Yes, Mr Mayor. May I move the recommendation at item 13 on the paper that we adopt the supplementary planning documents for the Design and Sustainability SPD, the Housing SPD, the Parking SPD, these are these ones, and another big tome for you, hopefully to read tonight, if you haven't done it already, to withdraw the various guidance documents, which I'm not going to list there. Can I just thank all those who participated in this? Obviously, members of the public have been consulted on this, parish councils, and the EPH committee had several goes at this, and I think there was even some discussion in informal groups with members as well. And even Cabinet finally tweaked something just recently. It's another product of the combined efforts of all councillors, and I want to thank them for that. I hope they feel that they have influenced it. Like all of these documents, it's probably at its best today, but it's certainly better than what was there before. And then when we look at it again in a few years' time, we'll probably want to tweak it again. Certainly, I think we're all recognising that, just taking an example with parking standards, we need wider parking spaces, and we've sought to implement that. And it's not nowadays, as it might have been, that only certain people within our borough might have had larger cars, as we all know now, that all makes and models produce four-wheel drive cars, and all shapes and sizes of people getting them from all parts of our borough. So we need to make the parking spaces bigger for those reasons. And we have done that. We've listened to all the representations. That's why there's so many crossings out in here, I think. So I hope all of you will feel able to adopt these supplementary planning documents and agree to withdraw the listed items. Thank you. And I think Councillor Robertson would like to second this.
I will second it.
Thank you. We're now moving on to the annual review of the Council Constitution 2018. And that's 300, isn't it? 302. And I think it's Councillor Haley Eaches to introduce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the recommendation is as per the paper, and this did come to council last council meeting, but we needed to do some more work to part 4 of the constitution. So this brings back part 4. It has been through the constitutional working group. I have also sent it out beforehand, and I hope we've got agreement, but if there are any issues, hopefully we can resolve them tonight. But I'm confident this has been through a cross-party review, and would recommend that part 4, or the changes to part 4, are now agreed, and that the whole revised constitution will then come into effect on Monday the 3rd of September. And if I can just make clear, I know scrutiny raised some further issues with the constitution recently, which has only recently happened and only recently come to my attention, and there was a recommendation that that would go to the constitutional working group. It's all to do with access to information, so that doesn't form part of this, but that doesn't mean we can't amend things in the future. So I will be working with officers over the summer and looking to see whether that needs to come back to the constitutional working group later in the year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I start by just welcoming what the Cabinet members just said in regard to the access to information points? Just need a bit of clarity on that, really, because, again, just picking up that point, obviously the Constitutional Working Party looked at all of the elements but that point, because that was still with a working panel of scrutiny, and that panel is still doing that piece of work. So were we this evening to very simply, I think, say that that section is not adopted this evening but the rest is, the referral back to scrutiny and it through the CWP when we pick that up. I think we'd be very comfortable with that, Chair, and I'm happy to move an amendment to that effect unless the Cabinet member is willing to accept it. I wouldn't want to approve the access to information document in front of us as part of this, where there's still work being done by a panel to come to the Constitutional Working Party. I'd like that work done and then the Council to receive that finished article. This certainly isn't the finished article. The rest of it we've gone through in some detail and is fine, I think. I'll leave that for, I think the Cabinet member wants to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hear what you're saying, but we need a constitution. We can't have half a constitution in place or a constitution without one piece there. So I think we need to approve the constitution. I do understand that you're saying from your side you have some issues, so they will be looked at. And I'm absolutely happy for those to come back to the Constitutional Working Party, and I can speak to the proper officers over the August period and maybe look at a meeting in September, or I need to work out with the work scrutiny are doing how we deal with it properly. But I'm not sure I can agree that we can have a whole constitution, but that part of the constitution isn't going to be there. Otherwise, we're going to have no rules on the. I mean, officers may be able to give me some advice, but otherwise, we're going to have part of the constitution that isn't enforceable. So I think we have to. This didn't come up at the last time. We have to have the Constitution as a whole document, but I am well aware, and I think this chamber can now be well aware, that there are some issues with that, and we can look to, and if we do come to some agreement in the Constitutional Working Party in the future, there's nothing stopping any amendments to that part coming back to October or December meeting at a later date.
Can I ask you a question, Councillor? Currently, we have parts 1, 2 and 3, but not 4.
We currently have a constitution, and if there was an issue before now, then the existing constitution would take precedent. This is just an amendment, and the whole point of this is the light touch review that we've done on all the parts as a Constitutional Working Party. Everything else was approved at the last council meeting. What was approved at the last council meeting hasn't come into force as yet, because the document's got to come into force as a whole document. So on the 3rd of September, all the light touch review and all the amendments we made will come into force. That will be then a legally enforceable document. If we decide at further meetings in September or later, after scrutiny's done their review, that we need further amendments, we can easily make those amendments at a further meeting of this council. But my recommendation is we agree what's on here. I take on board what Councillor Harvey's saying. We have a legal constitution that is changed as of the 3rd of September, and if we want to change it further in due course, we can.
Thank you for the answer. Can I just say, the Chief Executive has advised me that he would like to give some advice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I sort of acknowledge the comment from Councillor Harvey and the response from Councillor Eachus. In terms of the work that's been done by members on a collaborative basis in terms of the Constitutional Working Group, clearly significant progress has been made in terms of trying to simplify the Constitution and have it in one place and make it easy to access. In terms of Councillor Harvey's comment, clearly there is an outstanding and current work stream in terms of scrutiny, in terms of the access to information piece. The point that's being made is that if you approve the document as on paper this evening, with effect from the beginning of September, there is a constitution which is up to date, where members only have to look in one place to understand where we are in terms of the Constitution. There's a danger that if you seek to approve part of a document, you then have to come to a view as to what bit in relation to access to information applies. Is it the existing Constitution that we're about to replace? Because what we can't have is a set of arrangements where there's no guidance in terms of access to information. So my reflection would be, if there's a view that members on the whole aren't content with the package that's before them, clearly it's for members to consider whether they want to go around the loop again in terms of the Constitutional Working Group. It would seem to me that was less than optimal because a lot of significant work has been carried on to date. But clearly, I think members need to take a view on that. I think in terms of where we're trying to get to is not having different versions of the Constitution floating about, because that would be terribly confusing for all members. So what we've sought to do in the paper is that on a go-live date, there is a version, on the clear understanding that there is some work underway, and when that work is completed, that gets rolled into an updated version.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And can I thank the Chief Executive for that comment and the Cabinet members' comments as well. If there is a clear recording in this meeting of that as a point, that there will be a review, because there are concerns about the interpretation that has been placed upon the access to information section of the Constitution currently, and those conversations weren't finished, they weren't completed, and they need to be completed. Therefore, if there is a cast iron guarantee that we will be able to examine those issues and continue with that work stream, then I understand what you're saying. Were that to come to a halt, were that to be prevented in any fashion, then that would cause an issue. So I think if we're saying this evening that it is going to have an opportunity for review, then great, understood, and I think we can accept that. And that work stream then needs to be completed and brought back in the appropriate way.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to just say this for the sake of it, but the resolution from scrutiny was that the Constitutional Working Party be asked to review and amend the members' right of access to information procedures rules section. I think I'm capturing the comments that were made in scrutiny where members of all parties and none were talking in terms of there being more discretion, I think, in terms of the access to information protocol, and that's what we want to look at again with the Constitutional Working Party. And Councillor Harvey said it. I mean, providing Councillor Eakes is saying, yes, we'll take it back, we will look at it, we will amend where necessary, consistent with the views that were coming from, as I say, all members of scrutiny and elsewhere, then I think we've got a commitment for the future that we'll depend on, and we can move forward with the adoption of the Constitution this evening, Chair. Mr. Mayor, sir.
Thank you.
So just to clarify, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I am happy with what Councillor Harvey has said, that we will review it. I do not know, standing here right now, it wasn't in scrutiny, the amendments they seek, so I'm not saying they will be agreed, but I am happy that in that Constitutional Working Party we had some very good discussions, very good debate, and I'm happy to come back, wake that Constitutional Working Party, if you like, because I think after the last meeting we thought that that was probably it, and then scrutiny happened. So all of this has happened since I've put this paper together and worked with officers to finalise this. So I'm more than happy to bring it back to CWP, review it, and then take it from there. And if we need make amendments, that we can then bring it back to this council. If those amendments aren't agreed, we can bring it back to council for a vote at a later date. And I'm more than happy with that, and therefore I move the amendment based on that reassurance. The recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Richards. You've heard the assurances. Are they acceptable? Yeah. Okay. On that basis, can we agree the document? Thank you. Oh, God, we're getting there. We can dispense with that.
So you can say...
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor.
Some of us are still thinking it's cold in there. Some of us.
We'll ask the officer to adjust the thing again.
The chillers are off, so all that's been blown through is outside air, so I've raised the set point of the temperature as well. So it does take a little while to take effect.
I'm sorry, the magician says the chillers are off, Councillor Regan. The chillers are off, and all that's going through now is outside air. We can't adjust the outside air. Thank you. Okay, now we can't change the temperature at the moment, but so we're going to have to move on to the next item, which is to congratulate Councillor Tucker for being here, and we don't need to agree any dispensation for you at this time. Now, I've just been reminded that I got the phraseology wrong. It's the recommendation that we were talking about. Not approving it, but just accepting the recommendation. That okay?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just confirm that everybody's happy with all the recommendations
Yeah.
on the paper.
Yeah.
And they're all not, but if you say that, yeah.
So, on page 301 of the main document, the agenda document, the recommendations are spelled out at the bottom of the page in a box. Can you see that? Yeah. And for the avoidance of doubt, I'll read them. No, I don't need to?
Yeah,
fine,
it's
that's
just
fine.
that agreed as on paper.
So we agreed as it is? Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. We're going home soon, don't worry. We're now on item 16. Item 16 is the allocation of seats to political groups. The recommendation is no change. Is that agreed? Thank you. The annual review and scrutiny report is number 17. And I'll get there in a minute. Why did I draw this? Say again? Notice?
Page 463.
Yeah, wait a minute, no, annual review, yeah. Dispensation, allocation of seats, 463, Jesus. I read this on last Saturday morning. Okay. Scrutiny Committee, the page. We have here the councillors of the Scrutiny Committee. What are we doing with that? Oh, it's the annual report. Have you read the annual report? Of course, I did too. So, can we accept the report? Agreed? Jesus, it's great stuff. We come now to motions. 18, notice of motions. The first motion is the future of the NHS, or thereabouts, of primary care. It's proposed by Councillor Harvey and seconded by Councillor Kim Taylor. Would you like to move the motion, Councillor Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to stand up and start by saying how amazing our NHS is. It is its 70th birthday, and we should be celebrating. We have amazing staff and professionals in our NHS within Basingstoke and Deane, and it's right that we celebrate them. However, they, I am sure, cannot be feeling good about what is actually happening to our NHS and to primary care. But we've talked about health inequalities in this place, in Basingstoke, for years. Dentists, NHS dentist cuts, mental health cuts, cuts to CAMS, cuts to care for the elderly, shortages of GPs and nurse practitioners. There is an actual NHS funding crisis because services are being stretched. People are seeing cuts to their primary care services and they are concerned for the future. This was a major issue in the recent local elections across the whole borough. Health inequalities are real. The leader of the council in his speech for the budget for the first time acknowledged what we've been saying for quite a number of years, that there is actually a serious issue of life expectancy in our borough between different communities. Where you live, the postcode lottery does have an effect directly on your access and ability to get good healthcare. And what do people want? They want access to good quality local healthcare, and it is a priority for them. So the idea, the proposal to merge surgeries doesn't actually help, especially when the consultation on the merger is a sham, because the decision was predetermined. Those surgeries were preparing services to merge before the consultation had been completed, before residents had had chance to have their say, and that is regrettable and disgraceful. For example, recently it was commented about Ruxtown potentially having a 20% reduction in the GP sessions on offer. That isn't good enough. That is a serious issue. It's hard enough to get an appointment to see a GP, let alone your own GP. And the idea that's been put out there from our health colleagues that IT can solve some of this, a lot of people don't particularly want to have an appointment with a GP down the end of Skype or do it through IT. They want to see a health professional who can advise them and support them in their moment of need when they are unwell. They want actual contact with a health professional. And one of the issues we have with the distribution of health services across our borough is buses. Getting to a surgery in the first place. And again, the mergers are not going to help this situation. Stood at bus stops in all weather to take 2 buses to get from one side of town to the other side of town with children, or if you're elderly when you're feeling ill, is not a good experience. We need to change the approach to healthcare in Basingstoke so we deal with those issues of inequalities. Think about what happened today in Winklebury. There's a notice being put up on the Winklebury surgery that says, now closed. Residents weren't informed, no detail being given out to the community, just a notice slapped on the front door that says we're no longer doing the surgery in the Fort Hill surgery anymore. That isn't good enough. Yeah, what about residents in Buckskin who have to take the 2 buses, come into town, get off the bus, get on a bus to take the bus to get to Popley, if you can get to walk to the surgery? Again, another example of health inequality and accessibility in our town. It's not good enough. And not everyone's got a car. Some of the communities we're talking about have the highest proportion of people who don't own a car. So they are being denied access to health care in the way they deserve, and it is an issue. I'd like to thank the Southam councillors tonight for their work, really, in fighting to get the Southam surgery. That new surgery is superb. But it's really just the one example. We want more of that. A local surgery in the community delivering. And the issues that created for other communities, we should not ignore either. That created issues for other communities in our town. And if we're going to have growth, if we are genuinely going to see Basingstoke grow, then those health services need to be planned properly so that the communities that are new don't get new services at the cost of and the expense of our existing communities. There needs to be a proper plan and a proper balance between the provision of healthcare in Basingstoke. A plan not done to people, not behind closed doors amongst professionals simply having a conversation amongst themselves, but something that is transparent and accountable, that genuinely engages people so they understand the future of the NHS and healthcare in our town, and not such that it is then put vulnerable to private healthcare companies that are out there in the wings waiting to come in. And we don't want that. We value our NHS, we value the practices we have, we value our hospital, and we value what they do for us. It was an absolute mistake when Maria Miller supported the closure of the walk-in clinic at the hospital. She should never have done that. The pressure that put on our GPs, the pressure that put on A&E, talk to the professionals there. They tell you the story. Mr Mayor, if we're going to deal with the NHS properly in our town, we really need to have an appropriate plan. Let us listen to our residents, do the piece of work as the broker, the representatives of the people that we are, and inform our health professionals properly of the concerns that our residents have. Let us be the borough council they want our residents want us to be.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Kim Taylor, you want a second?
Yes, I do, and if I may speak to it as well. GP mergers were a very hot topic of conversation on the doorstep during recent local elections and by-elections, not just in my own ward of Brighton Hill South, but in other wards too. Over 2,300 people have engaged on my social media pages about this particular merger that we're talking about today. Feedback I received included: the bigger an organisation is, the more difficult it is to manage, the more management staff costing more money, the less money for patient care. Gillies merged with Overbridge several years ago. What happened to the original Overbridge surgery? Closed, gone. I chose Gillies because it's local to me. If I wanted to go to Camrose or Hackwood, I would have registered with them. Whatever happened to the continuity of care? I want to see people who know me and my medical history. It's hard enough to get through on the phone now. What will it be like when 3 GP surgeries worth of people try to get through? For your information, that's 44,500 people for this one new practice. How will I get to Hackwood Road for the respiratory clinic? I can't drive and I can't afford the bus fares. I can't bear the thought of getting sick kids on 2 buses. These concerns echoed the results of the patient surveys undertaken by the surgeries. They should not be dismissed lightly, because in Brighton Hill, the ward's demographics show in 30% of households, people live alone with no one to help them get to their medical centres. 22% of households are without any form of car ownership. 15% of households are over 65. We are seeing that the day-to-day effect of this merger now is a real reduction in the provision of local healthcare services. For example, respiratory clinics are reduced now to only 1 at the Hackwood practice. Family planning and women's health, and that includes cervical cancer testing, will only be at Camrose Surgery. It will no longer be possible to see a doctor on the same day at any of the 3 medical surgeries. The new improved on-the-day service will only be available at 1 surgery, Camrose, and will be staffed by triage nurses and paramedics, not doctors. The repeat prescription service will be based at 1 surgery only, but as of yet we don't know which one. For the majority of Brighton Hill residents, getting to Camrose for the same day service or any of the other hub services proposed will involve 2 separate bus journeys of about an hour at a cost of over £4 each way. That's £9 to see your doctor. This is certainly the situation that many of my residents will find themselves in. There's Tommy, an 80-year-old, fiercely independent widower with serious, painful hip conditions. He will need to go to Camrose now for joint injections that won't be done at Gillies anymore. The additional bus journey and the extra walking time will be crippling for him. And then there's Alice, a busy mum with 2 youngsters, without a car during the week. She will have to struggle with sick and crying children on 2 buses. The fares will take a big chunk of her food bill. And what is the real cost of this merger of business convenience? When it's hard to get through on the phone to make an appointment, or it's too difficult to get to the surgery, people will put it off for another day. John will just put off going about that niggling cough, or Jennifer will leave her cervical smear for another week, or month, or 2. And we all know the importance of a quick diagnosis in terms of the prospect of survival of many illnesses. So this isn't just about residents whinging about whether it's too inconvenient or too costly to get to the doctors. This is about private businesses running supersized practices that are not meeting the clinical needs of their patients. We see this around us. The private companies operating Rooksdown are reducing services even though they continue to make profits. Good healthcare infrastructure is vital to our residents and the growth and development of the town. The council must work more closely in partnership with the CCGs to achieve this, and that is why I am supporting this motion, and I urge you to do so.
Thank you. Councillor Tony Jones wants to speak.
Maiden speech.
Oh, sorry. Another maiden speech. And a very good one too. Thank you. Councillor Tony Jones.
Trust me to follow that. What I've got getting up is about Buckskin. I'm not going to apologise about it. We've been on about Buckskin since I've been a councillor and long before. with doctors' surgeries and everything else. All the indices for Buckskin Ward are the worst in the town. Low car ownership, you name it, we've got it. And we haven't moved forward. I've spoken to the CCG over a number of years, and I do believe some of our officers have. We need to put some more effort in. What you're talking about now as Basingstoke town as a whole, this merger, has been happening to Buckskin since it's been built. I'd just urge the officers to get with the CCG, and if I can come along, I'd like to have a little bit of a go myself, and see if we can get something done. We can't all have doctor surgeries on our doorstep, we understand that, but we do need other things. And Buckskin in particular, we were trying with my colleague Nigel, and I know now Steph is backing me on this one, trying to get some sort of nurse practice in Buckskin, because there's an age thing. You know, the estate was built, what, 1969, 1970. A lot of those people are still on the estate, but they're not very good at getting on buses, if we've got them. And now they're all in different surgeries, but now they've all joined. Now you try and get from Buckskin, no car, to Brighton Hill, so you're going into town, coming back out, got no money. I think these are the things we should be raising as a whole as a council, not just on a political issue, but actually get behind this and say, come on, what is happening in our town? You know, it seems to me that we argue a lot, but we don't seem to be breaking through the barriers in Basingstoke and saying, this is a proper town. It used to be a small town, it's getting bigger, but some of the practices that are happening in our town now is not good enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Simon Bond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to start by saying I support this motion. The North Hampshire Clinical Commissioning Group have for some time been working towards delivering their part of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Transformational Plan. This local plan by the CCG has the ambition to deliver across our health and care services the national ambitions of the NHS, caring for people with complex needs, helping people to stay well, improved access to urgent care when and where it is needed, modernising our hospitals and delivering excellent care, access into and out of specialist care, supportive care where extra help is needed, and to grow the NHS workforce. We as a Borough Council are committed to supporting the NHS to achieve these ambitions. And it is with this in mind that the leader has not only written to the Secretary of State, but also had 2 meetings with the Secretary of State and our local NHS partners. The changes in this motion relate to the development of wider primary care services with network groups of GP surgeries, delivering health and care services focused at our most vulnerable, helping people to remain at home through providing same-day extended access to GP services in the community, 8 a.m, 8 p.m, Monday to Friday and at weekends. Locally, this has meant 5 working groups of practices are being created, with each group of practices implementing how they work together differently. We have heard of one example. The implementation and communication of this has been subject to many discussions with the CCG and by myself and others, especially the chairs of patient participation groups, and at the CCG AGM. I could not agree we need to work together. It is a shame no Labour councillors came to the CCG AGM. I agree there is confusion and concern and a lack of understanding of our patients as to what is happening and for them to try and work out what the impact may well be. I support this motion not because the intent of the CCG to achieve these ambitions and improve services can be faulted, but to ensure that the impacts are understood by the CCG and all the partners in the health system, and to guarantee that everything can be done and is being done to communicate these changes effectively and responsibly to minimise patients' concerns if they prove to be unfounded. If issues are discovered, it is only right that the Borough Council works with the CCG to resolve them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rob Goulding.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too support this motion. Can't endorse entirely some of the detail of the criticisms in Councillor Harvey's speech, but the thrust is fine and the motion is fine. CEP have already engaged with the CCG on this. Members will remember that we had the CCG in February last year to discuss their primary care strategy and their estate strategy, which means where the buildings are. And we raised a number of the issues that have been raised tonight. We mentioned several issues in specific wards, including Buckskin. We expressed concern for elderly residents and others who are not comfortable using technology if use of applications such as e-consult were more widely deployed. We emphasised the importance of reliable transport options for patients attending surgeries who lived some distance away, particularly if the CCG were progressing with larger hub surgeries. So we've started the dialogue, but at the time the strategies were very high level and they were just strategies and the CCG weren't able to engage with us on the details. So this is entirely the right time to bring this motion forward. Hopefully we can now get into much more of the detail with the CCG. And perhaps I should just mention one other thing. GP commissioning in our area is co-commissioned with NHS England as well as the CCG. So we will need to remember to try and engage with NHS England as well as the local CCG. But I'm happy to support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Andrew McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I get the impression we're pushing a little bit against an open door. Much of what I would have liked to have said has been said already. Just picking up on Councillor Bound's point, the CCG AGM, we actually had a council meeting scheduled for that night, and there was also the South West Action Group meeting that night, so there were plenty of clashes, so I don't think that can be held against councillors not attending that particular meeting. The fact that the CCG has engaged with us last year is encouraging, but I wouldn't sit on my laurels and think, oh, we've only seen them 1 year, we should see that as being satisfactory. To be honest, the amount of representations we've had from the public in this recent merger warrants us meeting with them again at CEP, and I hope we can do that sooner rather than later. There is a lot of interdependency already between Brighton Hill and South Ham. We had a briefing at the end of last week on the Brighton Hill roundabout, and it transpired that we had 200 people an hour using the underpasses at Brighton Hill roundabout, either using a bicycle or on foot. Some of those will be elderly people that will get more infirm and less mobile as time goes on. In the next motion, we'll be talking about buses and transport options, which is very apt. But I think we need to bear in mind that this is not going to be the only merger of its kind in Basingstoke. There will be other surgeries merging, and some of them may be even more unpalatable. You may be in a situation where you have rural practices merging and people having round trips of 20 or 30 miles. You may have practices merging and people going across the county border, places like Morton West End. You might end up going into Reading to see your doctor. So it's really important that we capture the experiences of this merger, of this giant 45,000 patient surgery, and view these things from the standpoint of our patients, our constituents. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Councillor Hannah Golding.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am also going to be supporting this motion this evening, and I do agree that we do have something positive to contribute to the planning that the CCG is doing. I have also seen, with the residents of Brighton Hill North, that there can be improvements on how changes to GP surgeries are communicated, and I have already made my views on that known to one of the representatives of the CCG. I think it was unfortunate, and had they engaged with us better, we could have handled it better. I also agree with the concerns about the transport challenges, because that will cause difficulties with some people. And I think us working closer together with the CCG can also, as well as us helping them understand our residents' concerns, can also help us to understand some of the reasoning behind why they are driving some of these changes. And I think the e-consult or the digital technology is one of those things. I was meeting with the IT lead for the CCG last week, and I kind of raised that not everybody's sure about having online things. And he was like, no, the idea isn't to replace all GP consultations with online consultations. The idea is for people who want them to use them, me, they can use them, they can reduce some of the pressure on GPs so that GPs actually have more time for face-to-face consultations with residents who want that and who need that level of attention. Now, personally, as an IT user and fan, I'd be perfectly happy with that. I think that's really beneficial. I have 2 jobs, including this one. I don't have a lot of time to visit a GP. If I can make a consultation on phone and get messages by text, which is what happens at the moment with my surgery, I am all for that. But I don't want that to be the expense of other residents not getting face-to-face contact when they need it. And that is not the plan. And I think we need to feel very confident in being able to reassure residents of that. Now, I believe we, and as the council and as individual councillors who know our ward, have a lot to contribute. But I think we also need to have some reasonable expectations of how we can do that constructively. It's not our task to write a strategy for primary care in the borough. It is our task to support the CCG to write the strategy. And I think members of CEP moving forward should bear that in mind. So in summary, I do support our continued effort with this, both in the ways that have already been happening for the last few years, but also through the future work that members of the CEP can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jonathan Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to say a few words on this motion. In case people don't know, I was actually brought up in a large medical family in South Wales, and the family conversations frequently were around medical matters, obviously, and indeed about the NHS. I have 2 uncles who were GPs in a town called Rumney, which is just the other side of the mountain to Tredegar, where Aneurin Bevan was born and brought up. The legacy of Nye Bevan is clearly one of the cornerstones of our welfare state. Very much respected organisation and one that we all treasure. Over time, it has, of course, grown immensely in size, stature, and, of course, complexity, as indeed the massive advances in medical science have gone forward. And with these demands, with these changes, there are, of course, increased demands and indeed expectations on the NHS, which are becoming more and more intense. The job of a general medical practitioner is clearly one which holds considerable responsibility, and these days this responsibility may well be tinged with fear of litigation, another burden that the GP has to bear. These, of course, will have consequences and influences on the running of primary care practice. Now, I've heard this evening many of the what goes on in Basingstoke. I just wish to comment on Tadley, where I have spoken to the Tadley medical practice, and they, in fact, run a tremendously good service there. We have 2 surgeries in the town, and apart from the occasional difficulty in getting an appointment at a convenient time, it is nonetheless providing a very good service. I'm not so sure I would describe it in such hyperbolic terms as crisis and use these sort of words, as far as Tadley is concerned, at least, where I do have some knowledge. Now, the motion refers to the provision of primary care, referring to its accessibility, continuity of care, and concerns about the merger of Basingstoke medical practices. I agree with the statement that in the motion that this counts as a responsibility for the well-being of our residents, and as such, I will be supporting this motion. Also, as a member of the CEP committee, I would be pleased to be involved in reviewing the primary care services available in the borough, if indeed it comes to our committee. I would, however, like to add one further point. I do not like seeing the NHS used as a political pawn. I trust that political point scoring will not be part of any deliberations that may take place at the CEP committee. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, I've got one further person to speak, and being as there's very little or no opposition, I'm going to move to the vote thereafter. Councillor Saunders.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor. Yes? He wants to sum up. That's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are all, I'm sure, going to vote to support this motion, and absolutely right that we should do so. It's one of the top three things when you ask our residents what do they most want to assure themselves of a good and prosperous life. They want homes, they want to feel safe in those homes, but the third pillar is always they want to be healthy. They want to have a healthy life as well. So it is quite right that we should be concerned about the health of our residents and the way that that health is maintained. Those of you who have a long memory will remember that I have been a long-standing supporter of the redevelopment of the hospital to provide that cancer unit that was originally planned to be down at Junction 7 and the other unit. That seems to temporarily, at least, have been put on the back burner. I remain convinced that is the right thing to do. I cannot imagine how in 10 or 15 years' time this borough can be served by a hospital which is 40 years old, designed way before the modern technology is being used, and for that matter, one which has not been seriously under-maintained over the years. So that I just do not see as being a viable proposition. But you cannot just look at the hospital on its own. You've got to look at the whole healthcare structure. And how is that going to be reflecting the change in our population? It's not just the size of the population, which will have grown significantly by the time we get to 2030, but it's also the age profile. We're going to move significantly towards having, I think it's 25% of our population over the age of 65 by the time we get there. That will require a totally different kind of care with different types of provision within the community to deal with people like hopefully still me, and probably quite a few of you as well. So that is another challenge that we have facing us. And it was for that reason that this time last year, I wrote to both the Secretaries of State, to the Secretary of State for Health and the Secretary of State for, as it was, no, DCLG in those days, and said, you can't ask me to build loads and loads of houses if you don't tell me how you're going to keep the people who live in those houses healthy. And that precipitated a first meeting with the Secretary of State for Health and with the CCG and various luminaries from the NHS. You can never forget the NHS in this. And somehow or other, the hospital got excluded. Don't ask me why, don't ask me how, but they got excluded. But what came out of that was an agreement that there had to be a proper plan for healthcare that reflected the needs of the community and that the community had to be involved in producing that plan. And the CCG undertook to go and do that and to go away, and it went away. And we agreed that we would come back in May of this year to look at what that plan was like. And we all trotted off up to London and saw Jeremy Hunt again in London. And what they had produced, the CCG, was actually a very major step forward. They had actually got some clarity in what their thinking was, even though I still fail to fully understand their concept of virtual hubs. And so I have every sympathy with people who don't understand where they're supposed to go and get their medical care. But what was very clear was that, and what I said to the Secretary of State was, look, this is not a plan, this is just a plan to have a plan. It had something like a 3-year horizon. You can't plan surgeries, you can't plan hospitals on a 3-year horizon. You have got to be looking 5, 10 years in front. And so what was agreed at that meeting was that's exactly what needs to happen, is what is now due to happen, and that we would set up a group which would consist of the chair of the CCG and the chief exec of the CCG, the chair of the hospital and the chief exec of the hospital, the lead member and the chief officer of Hampshire County Council, because remember, it's very important to include adult social care in this as well. And finally, it would include somebody from the NHS, England, at a senior level, Sir Neil Mackay, and this group would be also including this council. For the first time, this council would have a place on the table there. Not only that, it would actually be chairing that meeting to ensure that that group remained focused on the needs of Basingstoke and it didn't get disseminated into, how are we going to cope with healthcare in the northwest of Hampshire. So we are making steps forward, but I have to be honest and say it's bloody hard work. And I don't expect it to be easy in the future, but I think there is finally a realization that
being practical about things like, are the bus routes in line with where the surgeries are due to go? And all sorts of other practical applications that make living the life sensible, living the life a reasonable proposition for our residents. To make that acceptable is something which they have to take into account. I was at a meeting the other day when the leader of the STP said, quite without prompting, finally, Basingstoke and Deane have forced us to realise that we have to be part of the community that we serve, and that that the communities have to be involved in our planning. That, if it proves to be right that they accept it, I regard as a major breakthrough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. To go to the vote, we need to sum up first. So, Councillor Harvey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I listened to what the leader says, and I think that idea of the strategic view that says we need to bring the social care element, the hospital, our GPs, and those services together, of course, makes sense. For those communities that are growing, of course, but also for our existing communities. And I think that's the dichotomy we're seeing. That's the inequality we're seeing at the moment. Because in so many of our existing communities, I mean, in a sense, we look forward all those years to say this is the way we want things to be. And right here, right now, we have residents in Winkleberry and Brighton Hill and in Buckskin who today and tomorrow cannot access the healthcare they would like to, they feel they need, because of the current situation. We need to really understand the concerns they have so that we do our representative role as councillors to make sure that those bodies that do know the planning, that can do the planning, do it in such a way that we deal with the inequalities here now as much as plan for the future. It really is a balance to be struck. And I'm just thinking, I mean, just trying to keep this real, Chair, in wrapping this up. If you are an older person who lives in Oak Ridge, who doesn't drive, who hasn't got access to a car or a friend's car or a family, walking down to Crown Heights isn't easy. If you live in Buckskin and have to take the 2 buses with your children on a pram, be it dad or a mum, you might be the one who's unwell. They may be the one who is unwell. That's a reality that residents are facing today. If you are in that position where your life is directly being affected, your quality of life, because of the manner in which these mergers are taking place, the manner in which our social care isn't working because of the bed blocking at the hospital or because of other issues to do with Hampshire County Council, or if it's in that realm of where we actually want this wonderful brand new hospital, of course we do, and we want the cancer care, yet we need to deal with the hospital services today and the way they are and the funding issues they've got, then those are the real life issues I want to see heard at CEP, and we want to hear our residents' voices. That voice needs to be part of the planning process. And to date, I would just finish on saying, I think, what's gone very wrong with the merger debate and the merger consultation is, what has happened to all those voices? Because I got the letter back to me saying, as a patient, it's all wonderful. You don't need to worry. We've taken everything into account, and 90% of people are saying it's going to be an amazing thing. That doesn't reflect the true opinions of the residents of Basingstoke. That isn't good enough. Therefore, we can help and be the broker and be the borough council that people want us to be on this vital issue to them.
Thank you, Councillor. Can we all agree to refer this motion to the CEP? Agree? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As many of you will already be aware, Hampshire County Council is consulting on proposals to switch off streetlights and supported passenger transport services and the concessionary travel scheme. This consultation runs until August the 5th. In typical fashion, the information pack doesn't go into any meaningful detail other than to briefly mention buses under supported passenger transport services, Proposal 2, and a 50p fare under concessionary travel scheme in Hampshire, also under Proposal 2. It's only when you go into the survey itself that it mentions the services at risk. The number 4 bus going through South Ham, Buckskin, Long Roman Road, through Rooksdown and Popley to Chinham. The number 12 bus through Blackdam, Harroway, Brighton Hill and Hatch Warren. The number 14 to Tadley. The number 15, which loops round Southview. And the number 74 in Overton. Even then, it doesn't mention to the general public the likelihood that they will be cut, although there is a cryptic comment about developer contributions against the number 4 service that hints that it might be saved, otherwise they'd lose the money that keeps it going anyway. It does, however, mention that we in Basingstoke and Deane already support late bus services on 8 routes, numbers 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 11, and Sunday services on 6 of those. We also support 5 services entirely, 3B, 16, 55, 59 and the centre shuttle. The survey seems designed to guilt-trip residents with questions such as, how often do you or your members use the bus services? And a number of questions that appear irrelevant to the central discussion, designed to bounce respondents into inadvertently supporting cuts, such as, do you prefer a frequent service that operates on fewer days versus a less frequent service that operates on more days? Most people want neither. They want their service to stay the same. The only meaningful input to it was anything else you wish to say. What I wish to say is this, and I'm sure many of you will agree with me. Basingstoke is already doing a better job of supporting its bus services than Hampshire. It is therefore time for Hampshire to hand over responsibility for transport services in Basingstoke and Deane to Basingstoke and Deane. Their proposals are flawed. They've already walked away from supporting frequent daytime services in the evening. Only 2 of our services are deemed viable on a Sunday, the numbers 1 and 3, serving our 2 biggest estates, Brighton Hill and South Ham. The number 1 carries 1 million passengers a year, yet the county don't want to support services in the evening. How sad is that? A few years ago, the number 1 service used to serve Hatch Warren as well. It was changed just to take in Brighton Hill. One of those reasons was high passenger numbers, yet the county considered the number 12 service connecting Brighton Hill to Hatch Warren as unviable, even when we're building more houses in Hatch Warren that would use it. Even though it's used by plenty of people in Brighton Hill to go to Sainsbury's in Hatch Warren, and people in Hatch Warren use it to go to the Gillies Health Centre. The same thing applies to Brighton Hill and Harrow Way. There's a new Aldi store on the route being built. Did it ever occur to Hampshire County Council to approach the developers for contributions for the buses? That Aldi might make a contribution so that pensioners in Harrow Way could get there? I'm sure there's plenty that others of you want to say on this, I'm sure. It's tempting to say that we should have a degree of sympathy for Hampshire County Council and the choices they are forced to make due to cuts in government funding. But this is a mess of their own making. The government didn't force them to charge 50p for pensioners. They chose that. Other councillors have made better choices and have better bus services. How can we be talking about cuts to bus services in Hampshire when passenger numbers are up 20%? And the biggest of these increases will be in Basingstoke, and it will reflect other parts of the South East, such as Reading, Brighton and London. Maybe it's time to look at a new bus operator. We don't have that choice while we're still reliant on Hampshire. For them, it's Stagecoach or Stagecoach. There's also emerging demand for cross-town bus services with the merger of the doctors' surgeries. So all I would say is millions are being spent on infrastructure improvements, road junctions, and we should be supporting our buses because it will take more cars off the road and it will improve our air quality and have a number of other benefits. So I therefore urge you to please support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Regan.
I reserve my right to reply, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Westbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's worth taking a second to consider, Mr. Mayor, as many of our minds are focused on our summer holiday. that by the time we return to this chamber in October, this county consultation will be over. The last bus may have left the station and the fates of the number 12, the number 4 and the 74 may have been sealed. As this motion clearly states, 2014 saw Hampshire's own transport review clearly identify the importance and benefit to residents of Basingstoke and Deane of having subsidies on certain routes. Councils up and down the country continue to display publicly their proposals and plans and the aims and ambitions for residents. Basingstoke and indeed Hampshire are no different. Hampshire's website is clear. It says we put our residents at the heart of everything we do. We will enable people to do more for themselves, respond flexibly to people's needs and keep improving. Yet local authority funding for bus routes in England and Wales has been cut by 45% since 2010 and more than 3,000 routes reduced or scrapped. The county has 4 strategic aims, Mr Mayor. Firstly, they aim to see that Hampshire maintains strong and sustainable economic growth and prosperity. They say they will achieve this by improving Hampshire's connectivity, supporting businesses to start and grow, in turn help to create more jobs and helping people into work. I cannot disagree with that. Bus travel is a vital driver of economic growth in the UK. More people commute to work by bus than all other forms of public transport combined. Every £1 invested in bus infrastructure can generate more than £8 of wider economic benefits. The county also aims to help the people of Hampshire live safe, healthy and independent lives and say they will achieve this by supporting people to live independently in their own homes. I cannot disagree with this either. Buses provide a vital service for our communities and a lifeline for our most vulnerable residents, whether to go shopping, pick up medication or attend doctor's appointments, as we've heard earlier, or socialise with friends. The bus enables many of our residents to see more than just a delivery driver. The county also aims to help the people of Hampshire enjoy a rich and diverse environment. They say they will achieve this by protecting and improving Hampshire's environment and quality of life, enabling people to live healthy lifestyles and to access and enjoy Hampshire's countryside. And it's worth noting that buses are the poor relation of public transport, yet one bus can take up to 75 cars off the road. The county's 4th aim is to help the people of Hampshire enjoy being part of a strong, inclusive communities and say they will achieve this by making it easy for people to find and access support within the community. The county are losing sight of their aims and these proposals cutting valued bus services is counterproductive. With a number of over 65s in Hampshire expected to increase from 274,000 in 2014 to 338,000 by 2024, social relationships are going to be vital for the maintenance of good health and well-being. Social isolation and loneliness can affect people of any age. However, risk factors such as transport issues and poor physical health are more common in older people, making them more susceptible. I would ask members, Mr Mayor, to consider the impact on our residents here in Basingstoke and Deane of the county, considering making changes to the concessionary fare scheme. The consultation is seeking views on an idea that County Council can then take to government, which then allows them the ability to charge our most vulnerable residents 50p as a starting point. This should be quickly nipped in the bud. It's a very slippery slope. Mr Mayor, I heard one Tory County Councillor at a recent meeting I attended say, why do we have public consultations if we never listen to the results? I couldn't agree more. We will need more than just a Hampshire consultation to steer these proposals. And I suggest to members, Mr Mayor, that a clear message from this council on behalf of Basingstoke and Deane residents is a very good start. Please support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Phillimore.
Mr Mayor, the threat of cuts to bus services across Basingstoke and Deane is a further extension of the politics of austerity being wielded by the current government and those who seek to aid and abet them. Austerity, you recall, Mr Mayor, is a policy of making the poorest and most vulnerable in our society pay for the mistakes and failures of the rich, powerful in business, banking and government. The consequences of these austerity measures includes a chronic and deliberate underfunding of local government and the loss of services to residents and or the increase in the cost of those services. Bus services across the borough are important to residents and no more so than the local services in Overton and Whitchurch. It's in the name. They are community bus services. They link the elderly, the less mobile, with shops, businesses, doctors' surgeries, libraries and community centres. They deliver valuable customers to help sustain the shops and pubs in the village and town centre. These businesses in turn are suffering from increases in rates from the government as they see their global competitors dodge and avoid the tax that our economy needs. Therefore, these bus services are important and vital to the local economy and need to be retain their financial support from both Hampshire County Council and this administration. I support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Simon Bond, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for raising this timely question, Councillor Boyd. In respect of their concessionary bus pass, the County Council are aware that any variance to the current national arrangements would have to be supported by a change in legislation. And this point is made clear in the consultation document. But the motion is factually incorrect. It is not only Hampshire County Council that are lobbying for these changes. Only 2 weeks ago at the Local Government Association conference, higher tier authorities, counties, unitaries of all political colour, Conservative, Liberal Democrat and Labour, were lobbying ministers for more flexibility in this legislation. As I hope all members are aware, the Hampshire County Council consultation on issues around street lighting, supported passenger transport services and the concessionary travel scheme in Hampshire was launched in mid-June. The consultation presents a range of options for discussion. They are not proposals. But crucially, to make savings in areas, there is a wider programme of savings across the services that Hampshire provide, and this runs until the 5th of August. I would be more than happy to receive comments from members to inform our response, but I will not be supporting this motion. In terms of the options being considered, the County Council have stated in their county-wide consultation that no community which currently has a passenger transport service will be left without. And it is important to note that at this stage, no specific services are referred to as far as being cut. Once the County Council have considered their comments and decisions around where their money is best spent, borough officers and myself will work with providers in Hampshire County Council to consider the most efficient method of providing transport where sufficient demand exists, along with substantial transport subsidies that are available from Basingstoke and Deane. Members should be aware that these local subsidies are in excess of 10 times more than any other district council in the county, and more than Hampshire County Council contribute themselves to our buses. And I have an undertaking from Rob Humby, Executive Member at Hampshire County Council, to work with us to ensure joint public money from both our authorities is used best to deliver bus services across our borough. It is for all these reasons that I cannot support this motion. There are no firm proposals, and we have discussions already in train to work with Hampshire to ensure Basingstoke and Deane communities retain bus services that support our communities. Who knows? Maybe we will soon be in a position that we will be managing the routes in our borough. If members do wish to raise specific concerns about their ward, please do this by Monday the 23rd of July in order to allow sufficient time for a response to this important public consultation to be formulated. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gavin James.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be supporting this motion. I've been heavily involved with Hampshire County Council and buses, it seems, or certainly my colleagues each side of me have. The petition has gone in, we've had a response, a bit of a holding response, but of course it's safe for the time being. I've had conversations with Chris Grayling, which I never thought would happen, because when Hampshire County Council originally said they were cutting the bus subsidy that they currently have from 3 million to 0, I accidentally emailed the Department of Transport to ask how much they were giving Hampshire County Council to subsidise buses. Mr Grayling sent me an email back saying we currently send them just over 1.something million, and then a few minutes later we got a budget alteration from the Conservatives saying £1 million had been added to the transport budget after all, and he weren't doing the full £3 million cut. But it shows how slippery Hampshire are that it takes a Conservative minister to stop them in their tracks when they're trying to cut budgets. I have to say, in all honesty, a consultation on whether or not the wealthiest pensioners can pay 50p a ride is something that I don't have a problem with. I think it's a very interesting question to ask. The problem is, I have absolutely no confidence that Hampshire County Council would collect those 50p's and use them to subsidise transport in the future. I think those 50p's would disappear and the bus routes would disappear soon after, and it wouldn't solve anything at all. I'm sure the 50p won't be 50p next year or the year after, because once it starts, I think my colleague over there, who I speak to a lot in the County Council, has mentioned the slippery slope. So I will support this because I think we need to do everything, whether it's petitions, writing to newspapers, sending letters as a local authority. We need to keep the pressure up. If we don't, other authorities will, and there's a real risk that Basingstoke and Deane will be the poor relation. Unfortunately, Hampshire County Council know that we've supported buses in the past when they've gone, and so they may look at us as the easy target. So it's really important we keep the pressure up, and that pressure needs to come from the administration saying, no, we're absolutely behind this, you're not dumping your problems on Basingstoke and Deane, support our buses. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Regan, you haven't spoken yet. I've got one more speaker. Do you want to speak last? Okay.
Thank you. I've warmed up a bit now. It's nice to know the Liberals favour a 50p charge. I mean, I remember that from my next leaflet. And there's always a sign bound, doesn't seem to think there's going to be any cuts. There's nothing but cuts for 8 years, is it? I mean, you're supposed to be proud of your cuts of austerity and reducing the size of the state down to 35%. But then again, you are in nationally, you're making a real good job of the Brexit negotiations. Well, yeah, we're all. I support the referendum result, but that's another issue. But on the bus in tonight, after using my bus pass, and an half-full bus, which is quite good, number 3, the vast majority using bus passes. But I'd like to think, how do we get to this position, actually? It's, I always think of the history of things, and there's a quote from someone I love quoting, Margaret Thatcher. What she said back in 1985, that if you're still using the bus when you're 30, consider yourself a failure. Well, speaking as a failure, and she brought in the 1985 Transport Act, which brought in this crazy system where you cannot have municipal bus services, open the gates for private monopolies like Stagecoach instead of having democratic accountable local services. So now we move on to 2017. There was a Bus Act to reform it, which Theresa May slipped through just before she went for a massive majority last June, but that didn't happen. And it banned many municipal bus companies, just still keeping it happy for the private sector. And let's go back to where bus passes come from. It come from Gordon Brown when he was Chancellor. Yes, and I like to remind the Tories that when the subprime market collapsed and the banks needed funding, they come to Gordon, didn't they? I mean, Gordon, he saved capitalism from itself. But in the meantime, he was bringing in bus passes. It's the greatest revolution ever for local people, accessibility. They are a real freedom pass. And I warn the Tories to put 50p on the charge on the bus passes. We will slaughter you because in propaganda and in campaigning. Because every one of them people who've got a bus pass, even in the Tory areas, in the rural areas, is a voter. They all vote. And they tend to vote more than others. Well, until you amend the Transport Act, we're all just spitting in the wind. Until we can get back to municipal bus services, cooperative services. Look at one of the best services in the area is Reading Bus. Reading Bus is owned by the council. It's an arm's length company. You can't move in Reading for falling over a bus.
Seem to come to us, Colin.
And just so the bus, touch the bus passes at your pearl, actually. And also I make a plea for number 4 bus, which services a lot of elderly people to get to the hospital and back and the faster stream to town. And there'll be a hell of a price to pay if that is cut. And that goes obviously for number 12 as well. And just to say a few things about street lights. In this year of 2018, with the 5th largest economy in the world, 6, well, it's in decline now because we got Brexit. We can't afford streetlights. I mean, go back to the 1860s where Joe Chamberlain in Birmingham, he lit and paved the streets and brought in municipal civic pride, and that was built upon by all parties. But now the Tories done nothing but to cut and do away with any sort of civic pride. And so we're now going to have dark streets at night in residential areas where people will be afraid to go out of their houses. So it's a shameful position we're in, all because of austerity and the bankers' crash, which, as my colleague has said, making the working class and the ordinary people pay for it. So I recommend the Tories, if they don't want to lose their seats due to the bus pass charges, they better vote for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Regan. I've only got one more speaker, and that's Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm supporting the motion because I hear, like my colleagues here, like our colleagues over there here, our residents in Basingstoke and Dean talk about the importance of buses to them. They realise what it matters to them to get to college, what it matters to them to get to the doctors, as we've already debated tonight, or get to work, or get around the town. If we're going to grow as Basingstoke in the way we want to grow, we want a first-class public transport system. A key part of that is buses. And this council puts its hand in its pocket more than the county council does. Are we saying that we are proud of that? We're saying that's a good thing that this council does that. It is a shameful thing that the actual transport authority doesn't choose to support our public transport system and buses in this borough in the way that they should. This idea that no community will be left without. Clever words, clever playing with words. When we will realise if the cuts do come through, and I'm sorry, how many times in the world have we had Hampshire County Council conduct a consultation and then go with the original decision it had all along? They never listen. They have never listened. Those communities will be cut off. And the idea that the 50p charge will stay at 50p, it's already been said, it will not stay at 50p. It will grow. And it will exclude and it will isolate. And if we have a growing older population in Basingstoke that we do, they will be made to pay in ways they should not. It is wrong, fundamentally wrong. And why is it wrong? Well, it's not just wrong for those that live in the town. I've actually had a couple of letters from residents in Sheffield and Loddon. I live in Sheffield and Loddon. I'm retired. And I use the number 14 bus. The route is from Bramley to Tadley return, starting from the bus station. The last bus is at 18:10. We don't have any buses on Sundays or bank holidays anymore. Our bus is a lifeline for older people, students going to college, school children, people going to work, the hospital, to the doctors, to dentists. We need the bus as a lot of us do. We don't have the luxury of owning a car, and we rely on the bus. The total lack of information from the council regarding the cutbacks, not enough information being given on the bus itself, and a lot of elderly people don't have access to the internet. We are excluded from the consultation. I'm writing on behalf of the people of the village of Sheffield and Loddon. We use the number 14 bus and we're very worried that we might lose this service. It's our lifeline to the doctor, the dentist, and to go shopping, to meet our friends in town for a coffee, a tea that brightens our day. Maybe new friends on the bus, by pure chance. All of these things are important in your life, where you're unable to drive anymore. A true lifeline for those who want to just live in the world and feel a part of it for as long as you can. 2 local residents, not in the town, living in our rural communities, in Sheffield and Loddon, currently represented by Conservative councillors, So it'll be interesting to see what the Conservative councillors this evening do in supporting their residents who value our bus services as they've written to me to say they do. In this circumstance, Mr Mayor, this motion is important because it sends the clearest message we can to the County Council that we do not support what they are proposing in their consultation at all. So yes, I urge you to vote for it and let's represent our residents. And those that don't, choose to do that and side with the County Council on this issue, well, that's a really sad thing. Because you're saying to these residents that their lives don't matter as much as others when they rely on the buses in the way they do to fulfil the quality of life that they wish to enjoy.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'll move a recorded vote, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. We're now prepared to vote, yes? Beg your pardon?
I'd like to sum up, if I may.
Oh, beg your pardon. You're right. You can sum up as well. Off you go.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I think it's an excellent idea that we have a recorded vote, given the resonance this will have with pensioners across the borough. I just want to pick up on Councillor Bound's assertion that this motion is factually incorrect. Everything on that text is true. Everything that I've said is true. In his Trump-like assertion, he is incorrect himself. I am somewhat disappointed that he doesn't want to make representations to the county, given the amount that we give in subsidies. We have a massive amount, of interest in this. The county are basically getting away with it lightly, and it's shameful that they do. They should be doing a better job, and we should be holding them to account. And we are their paymasters in this. We should have a devolved transport authority. The concessionary fare scheme seeks to save £380,000, but the budgetary calculation is that it will raise £4 million. That's making money out of pensioners. That's exploiting people in many cases who don't have that money, who risk isolation if they don't have a bus service. And this assertion that no community will be left isolated. Well, I've got 2 elderly homes on the Dankworth Road that are served solely by the number 12 bus. What are they going to do for a bus service if the number 12 is axed? So I think in terms of where we are with this, I could say a lot more. I do say it's a bit rich asking us to make submissions by the 23rd. That's 1 working day's notice, and a lot of us work. That's not a lot of time. But submit we will, and I have taken on board what everyone else has said, and I would urge you all to vote for this. Send a strong statement to Hampshire. They're getting away with a lot with us, and they're taking us for granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brown, what's your point of order?
Councillor McCormick said that I wasn't prepared to make representations, and that's in fact the opposite of what I said. I said I was prepared to make representations, and I don't need this motion to do it.
Excuse me, we can't have a debate across the chamber. You've made your point, thank you. It's okay. We're now moving to the vote. We've had a request for a recorded vote, so that will be accepted. So, are you all ready to vote? Okay. Those in favour of the motion, please show. Well, it's electronic up there. Have you all voted? Why? That's it. So the vote is closed, and the answer is? The motion is lost. What are the two numbers, 27? What are the two numbers? Doesn't it show? Twen- 26, 29.
26 yes, 29 on one abstention.
So the vote was recorded, and it was 26 votes for the motion, 29 votes against the motion, and 1 abstention. Is that clear? Okay, thank you. That concludes the motions, and we move now to the next item on the agenda, is to receive the minutes en bloc as outlined on page 8 of the principal agenda. Is that agreed? Thank you. And the next item on the agenda is actually the last item on the agenda, and that's questions from members. And we have four questions specified. 4 questions. The question 1 is from Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As per the order paper.
The Cabinet Member for Regulatory Services and the Environment to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Unfortunately, we have been experiencing some operational issues with bin collections in some areas of the borough. The issues have focused around vehicle breakdowns and staff shortages. Our contractor, Veolia, have and continue to work hard to resolve these issues. And I just want to reassure people that I am confident of that, because they are speaking with officers every day. One of the contract managers is in this building every Monday morning with officers, or at least on a conference call, speaking, updating, putting plans in place. So I am confident things are being done. They're working with agencies to recruit vacancies, and existing staff are working additional hours, including Saturdays, to collect residents' bins and bags. In most situations, if your bin hasn't been collected on the day it should be, which is unfortunate, we are doing what we can, but most of them, nearly all of them, are being collected the following day. So the message to residents is to make sure you leave your bins out so that those bins can be collected. And the website is now being updated every evening before officers leave the building, and it will set out the roads that are being missed. So if residents do contact you about a missed bin, if you can either look on the website or refer them to the website, it's on the front page. There's a whole list of all the roads, and it will say which of your waste, whether it's glass, recycling, etc., hasn't been collected. Obviously, Veolia are also working with the new contractor, Serco, who are taking over the contract in October to ensure as smooth a transition as possible.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor?
Okay, well, I appreciate the explanation of staff shortages and vehicle breakdowns. You know, I'm a bit concerned, obviously, with the transition. So, I would like some additional assurances that this is being looked at. If the service was taken in-house, then in times of crisis we could have got more people drafted in from other departments of the council. We do that when we have snowy winters and we get street cleaning people doing. Yes, that's the first clause of the question. I've got some others coming up as well.
You have one supplementary question.
No, I've got a number of aspects of the same question. So, I mean, I want some reassurances in terms of going forward that we do get service levels maintained with the changes in the contract. I also want some assurances that we will be doing a good job of policing the contract. And, you know, in this particular instance, there were a very large number of areas of Basingstoke that were affected: Kempshott, Buckskin, Winkelbury, Rooksdown, Brighton Hill, Grove. Knock-on effects from a Thursday going right through to Monday or Tuesday. So, you know, that to me suggests it's a breach of contract. So what fines have been levied on the operator, and what fines will be levied on the future operator if these things happen again?
Councillor.
think I'll answer
Councillor Reaches.
what I can. With the reassurances, I can absolutely assure you, and I am there front and centre of this meeting with officers, they are absolutely ensuring a proper handover with Serco. There's a number of senior officers involved in that. They have regular meetings. The OLIA are on board with that as well. So I can absolutely assure you there's no issues there. There will be KPIs, etc., in the new contract as there is in this one, but the new contract are going to be even higher ones to make sure that issues like this, if there are problems, will be dealt with, and hopefully we will have a smooth transition in October. So I do want to reassure residents that this is all under control, and I'm confident that there's senior officers and lots of other officers all working on this and doing everything they can. And as to in-house, then I don't agree with that. We did look at that as part of the waste contract before we went out to tender. The MAP looked at it in detail. We had a consultant and it was all looked at, and it was rejected for a number of reasons.
Thank you, Councillor. Unfortunately, you only get one supplementary. We now move to question 2, submitted by Councillor Tilbury.
The question is as on the order paper, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. And for Councillor Saunders to respond. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, harassment and bullying is something which we should all deplore, whether it's at work, between colleagues, at home in a domestic or social context, or even, dare I say, in politics. Respect and the maintenance of respect for one another, even if we may disagree with their views, is a cornerstone of a civilised society. Therefore, this Council has in place very clear policies on harassment and bullying, and on whistleblowing to enable any cases that may arise to be identified and dealt with quickly. These are policies which I'm sure are supported by all members, regardless of their political allegiance or none. This is not and should not be a party political issue. The circumstances to which this question refers arose at the end of last year, partly as a result of unattributed allegations made in the local press about bullying and harassment in the Law and Governance Unit of the Council. The situation was complicated by separate reports of online harassment of a former employee in that unit by someone unknown, including various threats to their family. There was no evidence the two were directly connected. In response, a number of actions were taken. As leader, I requested a report to be submitted to HR committee to examine whether there were specific issues to be dealt with in the legal department and what policies and processes were in place to deal with them. This was prepared by the Deputy Chief Executive as an independent senior officer with no direct line management relationship to the situation. He in turn used external advice to advise him on his appraisal to ensure impartiality. That report was submitted to HR Committee on the 16th of February and discussed fully. Given the subject matter and the significant risk of identification of individuals, that committee debate was held in private in accordance with legal advice received. It is true that a number of visiting members, including the questioner, and others requested a separate inquiry by an external body. That point was considered, but in the end, the conclusion of the committee, democratically arrived at, was that it was not required. I did, however, move a resolution which was accepted that a further report be brought back to HR Committee in June to review the actions already in hand. That happened on June the 18th, and the committee duly noted the progress in outcomes that were being achieved, including seminars on mental health issues. A separate investigation into the anonymous online harassment of the former employee and allegations made surrounding it was also carried out under the established complaints procedure by Rebecca Emmett, Executive Director of Borough Services. This involved liaison with the police because of the content of the online material. A copy of the investigation report was given to the complainant, but in essence, no evidence could be found as to who was the originator of the online harassment, nor was there any evidence to implicate any employee or member of the council. A copy of the investigation report was also forwarded to the police. Councillor Tilbury refers to being approached by current and former members of staff who have raised concerns that they claim have been ignored. As far as I can ascertain, the Council is not aware that any allegations of bullying and harassment of staff have been or are being ignored. If Councillor Tilbury has any such information, or indeed if anyone else, staff, union or member, does, then I would urge them to contact the head of human resources without delay so that the matter can be followed up quickly and effectively. Therefore, Mr. Mayor, my conclusion is that these matters have been correctly, thoroughly and effectively investigated. Lessons have been learnt where appropriate and necessary actions undertaken. I would therefore support the democratic decision of the HR Committee that no external inquiry is necessary.
Thank you, Councillor. I've been generous with time because I thought that had to be dealt with. No. Could you, do you have a supplementary, Councillor?
No, I was unlikely to get an answer, but could I ask if that the leader's response is made available to everyone in writing, please? Thank you.
It'll be in a minute, in full. Okay? Thank you.
As per the order paper.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Council does recognise the frustrations that some residents experience when vehicles are left in public spaces for long periods of time. The Council has responded to numerous abandoned vehicle complaints over the past 3 years and removed over 300 of them. In many situations, reports do reflect nuisance parking, given their frustration that a vehicle has not been moved for several weeks, but unfortunately will not meet the criteria that would apply when determining whether a vehicle is legally abandoned. When responding to an abandoned vehicle complaint, officers do a lot of work and they will visit and carry out an inspection. There's a criteria they have to meet, and if a vehicle hits a criteria, DVLA checks will then be carried out to obtain the registered keeper's details, who the council will then attempt to contact. If the registered keeper confirms ownership and the vehicle is in a roadworthy condition, unfortunately it's unlikely we will be able to do anything, as this wouldn't be classed as an abandoned vehicle. But where a vehicle is deemed to be abandoned on land that is occupied, the local authority must then give the occupier 15 days notice that they propose to remove the vehicle. So there is a long process, but it is being done, and officers are taking the seriousness of this and are doing everything they can. Any cars that pose an immediate issue by virtue of damage to them, e.g. smashed windows or burnt out, would be removed as a matter of urgency. Untaxed vehicles are immediately reported to the DVLA, who are responsible for enforcing these requirements. And just to reassure everybody that we are in the process of reviewing the information on the council website to provide residents with clearer guidance on what constitutes an abandoned vehicle, and this will include a facility to allow residents to easily upload photos onto the form they use to report abandoned vehicles, if that's possible for them to do. And just to be clear, it is an offence to abandon a vehicle. On conviction, the registered keeper could face a fine of up to £2,500 and or a term not exceeding 3 months imprisonment. A fixed penalty notice can be issued, and we are also currently considering a more robust approach to the enforcement in this area.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you have a bit supplementary?
The reason I asked this question is I have a resident who mentioned to the council back in December that this vehicle had been around for 12 months, not taxed, not insured. The resident had to search this information himself. The council didn't do it. They went back, and every time they came up, someone else was dealing with this issue. They seemed to be going back to square one. Eventually they came to me, and I had the same issues. It kept going back to square one. No, we haven't got no record of this. And eventually, after 6 months, the vehicle was moved. Do you think that's reasonable time?
I cannot comment on a specific case that I know nothing about, so I don't know. It maybe there's reasons for it. I don't know. But if there is a specific case and that needs to be looked into, then I can get, you know, the senior officer that deals with this and who said that I can name him tonight. So I'm not being Tom Payne, and he's the who I'm sure we all know, and he's the correct person. So I'm not able to comment on a specific issue without knowing all the facts and without knowing that one. But Tom can certainly provide some details if you want to contact him.
Thank you, Councillor. That okay? No? No. There's no more questions. Will you provide the information to us? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay, now going to the next question. Councillor Potter.
As per the order paper, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And again, it's Councillor Eaters to respond. Well, it's okay. I don't mind if Councillor Brown wants to carry the can. Councillor Brown, off you go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to thank Councillor Potter for his question. I'm aware that some residents do not have a positive experience when seeking to contact the police via the 101 service, and I have raised such concerns with the Basingstoke Chief Inspector and to the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. So better than agree to ask the question, I can indeed provide the answer to this question tonight. Members may not be aware that police forces across the county and the country are currently facing high levels of demand in their control rooms and contact centres. Hampshire Constabulary is no different. Michael Lane, Hampshire's Police and Crime Commissioner's view is that, and I quote, the 999 and 101 service has been and continues to be under pressure, but I would like to reassure the public that we monitor performance very closely and that the Constabulary's response to 999 calls and serious threats continues to be professional, impactful and timely. The short-term action taken has to be to recruit extra staff into the control room to support the increase in demand. And for the longer term, a project is nearing completion and will improve the public's experience of 999 and 101 and indeed all engagement and communication within the Constabulary. As a result, Hampshire Constabulary has been working jointly with Thames Valley and Microsoft on a programme to deliver a new command and control platform. I have an email ready to send to all members that updates on budget and progress to achieve that outcome. This new system will provide a more victim-focused response and provide more information to the call handler to enable the police to tailor their response to the needs of the caller, and in my view, and in particularly importantly, when dealing with people who are vulnerable, allowing all the information needed to be in one place to improve how the appropriate response is identified and offer officers better visibility of available resources and the ability to understand local crimes and the local landscape. As a member of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Police and Crime Panel, I will, with my colleagues, continue to scrutinise the progress and budget and impact of this project. And I would also remind members of the Joint Scrutiny Panel in the autumn for the work of the Safer North Hampshire Community Safety Partnership. I would also like to remind members that there is an all-member briefing on the criminal justice system being held on Monday, on the 23rd of July, which is intended to provide an opportunity for members to engage with community safety partners and is an ideal forum for information sharing, discussion, and also to understand the work of agencies, funding, and the processes involved in crime prevention, policing, victim support, offender support, and a focus on reducing reoffending. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will send the email.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you have a supplementary?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I'm grateful to Councillor Bound for his response. Could I just help him? It seems to me, in terms of the best interests of our residents, who clearly we're here to represent first and foremost, most of whom I would say would suggest that the 101 system is not fit for purpose. I have some figures that I'd like to quote, notwithstanding the information Councillor Bound has received from others, which suggests, for example, on a national basis, and this is 2016-17, over 1 million 101 calls went unanswered. And following a Freedom of Information inquiry in Hampshire itself, 135,000 out of 985,000 calls were unanswered. So clearly this is a scheme which is not functioning properly. The information that was issued today by the Home Office, or recently by the Home Office, suggests that only 9% of crimes end up with suspects being charged, and reported crimes by police figures are up by 11%. What I say is that the CEP, notwithstanding the information Councillor Bound can do, is to provide further information on behalf of our residents regarding the failure of the 101 scheme. Our residents need to have confidence in the scheme if they're going to use it. And the sort of frustration that they experience in terms of unanswered calls is something that as local councillors we need to deal with. We're not dealing with it. We can make better representations and improvements to the scheme, and I ask that the CEP consider this.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you have a response, Councillor Bound?
If I knew there was a question, I probably would put a response together for it, Mr. Mayor. My response as far as the scheme, as far as 101, would be I think it is also our duty as councillors to remind those who can that they may be better to report it through the online system that Hampshire Constabulary have, and also a very helpful process through the Crime Stoppers website. And also to remind that, of course, we are part of the Police and Crime Panel, whose job it is to scrutinise the Police and Crime Commissioner, who it is then his job to scrutinise the work of the Chief Constable and the Hampshire Constabulary, and it is their service.
Well, the reality is that's the end of the questions. I don't think it's the end of the issue. But are you suggesting, Councillor Bound, that everybody must now report by computer instead of by phone?
I think, Mr. Mayor, what I said was those who can should. So it wasn't everybody, but it would certainly reduce the pressure on the system if we didn't all consistently point to 101 where there are other more effective and less time-consuming methods to report.